Hello everyone. So in this lecture we will continue with the American school of diffusionism. So how is the American school different from its previous counterparts? So American school attempted to answer why diffusion takes place, and it did it through arguing that the process of imitation causes diffusion of cultural traits, and sometimes it is easy to borrow some traits instead of inventing separately. And the American school, they have the culture area approach. We will see it later in our lecture. So what is a culture area? A culture area is a geographical area occupied by groups whose cultures show great similarities, and these are grouped together. And culture originate at the cultural center of culture area. So we can see it like this. So this is a cultural area, this is the cultural center, these are the marginal area, then this is another cultural area, cultural center, marginal area, another cultural area, cultural center, marginal area, and this is the process of diffusion. And the method what they followed was that they divided the entire world into cultural area based on geography, and from each area list of traits prepared, and then comparison of different cultural areas for spread of culture was carried out. Now one of the important theorists of this school was Clark Whistler, whose work Man and Culture 1923 is an important part of the American school. So he gave two major principles. One was on the manner in which traits were spread, and he argued that traits spread in all directions as waves move out when stone is dropped in water, similar to what we studied in the German school. And greater the spread, then older the trait. So if a trait has the longest or the largest spread, that means it is the oldest amongst all. And trait is most elaborate at the cultural center and least at the periphery. So as we can see, the trait would be most elaborate at this location while least at this location. And so he divided America into 8 food areas based on subsistence, and this you can study in your textbook. And the other major principle given was of relative age of traits, which is also known as age area approach. So what is the age area approach? To understand cultural area in historical perspective. So historical perspective. So if a given trait diffuses outward from a single cluster center, the most widely distributed traits are the ones which are the oldest. So if a trait is most widely distributed, then it would be the oldest. And next is Alfred Grieber. Now he has a very interesting theory and approach towards diffusionism, and his book was Handbook of Indians of California 1925, and he gave a humanistic approach to anthropology. And one unique thing about him was he made numerous field trips, interviews, and good amount of data collection. So he gave an important concept of element survey, or the element survey approach. Now what is the element survey approach? He divided cultures into minimal units that would be characterized qualitatively. Okay. And so like he will ask questions like whether a group practiced polyandry, or whether they practiced cremation, and graduate students were sent out to uh, interview people on these questions, and then results were tabulated and published, and the element survey was plotted in space to understand the boundaries of a particular culture. So boundaries of a particular culture could be understood by plotting it into space. So what Kreber did was he revised the 8 food areas given by William Weiser into Clark Whistler into 7 grand areas, 20 areas, and 63 sub areas. So he further subdivided the division given by Whistler, and as we can see, his theory had several flaws. First and foremost was that he atomizes culture into bits and pieces and considers each element to be equally important. So, in a particular culture, practicing polyandry or monogamy may be more important than what is the ritual followed during after death. But the element survey approach does not make such a distinction. Similarly, it assumes that presence of a cultural element in one society is equivalent to its presence in others. So we can see that swastik had different meaning in Nazi Germany and India, but such a difference was not considered by Kreber in his theory. And Kreber also gave a very important concept of culture climax. So, what is culture climax? So, civilization advances by borrowing plus integrating traits of other civilization by diffusion, and then a stage comes when civilization reaches its zenith and it stops accepting new traits. Now that stage is the stage of cultural climax, and soon after that there is decline of civilization and spread of traits to other civilization, and thus it helps us understand macro changes. So in a culture, if it reaches climax, we can see it like this. So here is the climax. After that it starts to decline, but it leads to diffusion to other areas. Now coming to the important part of critique of American school. So what could be the critique? First and foremost, culture area is a mental construct. है ना? There is no physical reality, and there is difficulty in establishing cultural center and boundaries. It had a narrow scope. It had a narrow scope, divided world or nations into different regions, but failed to explain worldwide diffusion of culture. Worldwide diffusion of culture, and it emphasized too much on material aspects and failed to account for non-material aspects. And it emphasized too much on geographical areas but ignored other areas which give, or other aspects which give area feeling, such as language, ritual, food habits, etc. And it could not explain the methodology to establish a cultural area. But its greatest value lies in the field of science, agriculture, business, and modern day academics, where ready borrowing of ideas and diffusion of studies take place. Lastly, we will see a similar concept of acculturation. So, acculturation replaced diffusionism in the 20th century as the focus of anthropological research. It did ethnographic study of Native American tribes, Native American tribes, and Kreber argued that those changes in the culture brought by contact with another culture leads to increased similarity between both, which is what happens in acculturation. And many a times there is total absorption of one culture into another, which is assimilation. And we must remember that acculturation is gradual and not abrupt. And how is it different from diffusionism? So in diffusionism, we study what happens to elements of a culture. What happens to elements of a culture? Whereas in acculturation, we study what happens to whole culture. So we can see that acculturation takes a macro perspective. So this is it on diffusionism. And in the next lecture, we will study about historical particularism. And please leave a feedback or comment on how you like the video and any changes required. Thank you.